Beneath the Prairie Sky by Clara Winslow. The small town of Willow Creek lay nestled between rolling prairies and sprawling farmlands, where tall grasses danced in the breeze like waves on a golden sea. The autumn air carried the sweet scent of late wildflowers and sun-warmed earth, while the open sky stretched endlessly above, a brilliant blue expanse dotted with cotton-white clouds. When Eliza Sutton first laid eyes on this raw, untamed beauty stepping off the stagecoach in her carefully pressed traveling dress, her heart fluttered with both anticipation and uncertainty. At 24, with her chestnut hair pinned neatly beneath her bonnet and her grandmother's cameo necklace fastened at her throat, Eliza had left behind everything familiar in Philadelphia to become the town's new schoolteacher. The decision came in the wake of her mother's passing, when the elegant townhouses and cobblestone streets of her childhood began to feel more like a cage than a comfort. The advertisement for a teaching position in a distant prairie town had caught her eye one gray morning, and something in her soul whispered that this was her chance for a new beginning. The stagecoach rattled away in a cloud of dust, leaving Eliza standing alone with her trunk and carpet bag. She smoothed her skirt, fighting the urge to fidget as she took in her surroundings. The town square was modest but well kept, with wooden buildings lining the dusty main street. A general store's bell chimed merrily as customers came and went, while the rhythmic pounding of a blacksmith's hammer echoed in the distance. Ladies in practical calico dresses hurried about their errands, and children played marbles in the shade of a sprawling oak tree. "Miss Sutton, welcome to Willow Creek." The deep, resonant voice drew her attention, and Eliza turned to find herself looking up at a man who seemed as much a part of the prairie landscape as the endless sky above. He was tall, his broad shoulders and strong frame speaking of years of honest work rather than fashionable athleticism. His cotton shirt and well-worn vest were clean but showed signs of real use, and his brown hair was slightly tousled by the prairie wind. But it was his eyes that captured Eliza's attention. They were the same endless blue as the sky overhead, warm with genuine welcome and touched with something that made her heart skip a beat. "I'm Samuel Reed," he said, removing his hat in a gesture that spoke of natural courtesy rather than practiced manners. "The town council asked me to welcome you and show you to your lodgings." His smile reached those remarkable eyes, creating fine creases at the corners that suggested he was a man who smiled often and meant it. "Thank you, Mr. Reed." Eliza found herself returning his smile, her earlier nervousness fading in the face of his calm presence. "I must admit, this is all quite different from what I'm accustomed to." Samuel lifted her trunk with an ease that made her conscious of his strength. "Different isn't always bad," he said, his voice carrying a hint of gentle humor. "The prairie has its own kind of beauty, once you learn to see it." As they walked down the dusty street, Samuel pointed out the town's landmarks with evident pride. The white-painted church with its modest steeple stood at one end of the street, while the schoolhouse where she would teach sat nestled beneath tall cottonwood trees. The mercantile's wide porch hosted several older men in rocking chairs, who tipped their hats as they passed. "Most folks gather at the mercantile to trade news as much as goods," Samuel explained, slowing his pace to match her shorter strides. "Mrs. Thompson, she runs the store since her husband passed. She knows everything that happens in Willow Creek, and most of what's going to happen too." Eliza laughed softly at this, and Samuel's eyes crinkled with pleasure at the sound. "And what did Mrs. Thompson predict about the new schoolteacher?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Samuel's smile widened. "She said you'd either run back east within a month or find yourself so charmed by prairie life you'd never want to leave." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm hoping for the latter." The simple sincerity in his voice made Eliza's cheeks warm, and she looked away, flustered by the intensity of her reaction to this man she'd just met. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the boarding house, a tidy two-story building with a welcoming front porch adorned with pots of bright geraniums. "Mrs. Henderson runs the cleanest boarding house this side of the Mississippi," Samuel said, setting her trunk down carefully. "She's been fussing all morning, making sure your room is perfect." "You've been very kind, Mr. Reed," Eliza said, gathering her courage to meet his gaze again. "I appreciate the welcome." "Samuel," he corrected gently. "Most folks here just call me Samuel." He replaced his hat, touching the brim in a gesture of farewell. "If you need anything at all, Miss Sutton, don't hesitate to ask. Willow Creek takes care of its own." As he walked away, Eliza found herself watching his retreating figure, wondering why her heart was beating so quickly. She told herself it was simply the excitement of beginning her new life, but deep down she knew better. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity as Eliza settled into her role as teacher. The schoolhouse, though simple, was well maintained, with rows of wooden desks facing a black slate board. Her students came from farming families, their hands already showing signs of hard work, but their minds were eager for knowledge. She found herself adapting her teaching methods, incorporating practical applications that would serve them well in their prairie lives. She saw Samuel often during these early days, though their interactions were brief. He seemed to be everywhere, helping repair the church roof, advising farmers on their crops, organizing assistance for new settlers. Each time their paths crossed, he offered that same warm smile that made her heart flutter, and their conversations, though short, left her wanting more. Their first real opportunity to talk came at the harvest social, held in the church hall on a crisp autumn evening. While fiddle music filled the air and couples twirled across the wooden floor, Eliza slipped outside for a breath of fresh air. She found Samuel on the porch, leaning against a post and gazing at the star-filled sky. "They seem brighter here," she said softly, moving to stand beside him. "Less competition from city lights," he replied, glancing at her with a smile that seemed to hold secrets. "In Philadelphia, I imagine you couldn't see half as many." Surprise colored her voice. "You've been to Philadelphia?" Samuel's low chuckle sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. "Once, years ago, felt like a fish out of water. Too many buildings, not enough sky." He turned to face her fully, and in the lamplight spilling from the church windows, his eyes seemed to hold the same starlight they'd been discussing. "Do you miss it?" Eliza considered the question carefully, aware of how close they were standing. "I miss certain things, the libraries, the theaters, the familiar streets. But there's something about this place," she gestured to the vast darkness beyond the town's lights. "It feels more real somehow, more honest." "Real is good," Samuel said quietly, his eyes finding hers in the darkness. "Honest is even better." That moment marked a shift in their relationship. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. Samuel began timing his visits to the general store with Eliza's errands, and she found herself taking the long way home from school, past his farm, more often than not. The town noticed, of course. In a place like Willow Creek, little went unobserved, but their growing attachment seemed natural to everyone. One crisp Sunday after church services, Samuel approached Eliza as she chatted with Miss Henderson on the church steps. His usual confidence seemed tempered with nervousness as he removed his hat. "Miss Sutton, I was wondering if you might like to see my farm today," he said, his eyes hopeful. "The wheat fields are at their finest this time of year." Eliza's heart quickened at the invitation. Under Mrs. Henderson's knowing smile, she accepted and soon found herself seated beside Samuel in his wagon, acutely aware of his presence as they rode out of town. The steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves matched the rhythm of her pulse, while the autumn breeze carried the sweet scent of prairie grass and late-blooming wildflowers. The Reed farm sat proudly on a gentle rise, overlooking acres of wheat fields that rippled like a golden ocean in the afternoon light. The farmhouse itself was modest but well-maintained, with a wraparound porch and climbing roses that spoke of years of loving care. A massive oak tree provided shade near the house, and a well-tended vegetable garden flourished nearby. "My mother planted those roses," Samuel said softly as he helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "She passed 5 years ago, but they keep blooming every spring, stubborn like she was." His voice held fond remembrance rather than sorrow. "It's beautiful here," Eliza breathed, understanding now why he loved this land so deeply. The late afternoon sun painted everything in warm golden light, and the vastness of the prairie stretched out before them like an endless promise. "There's something else I'd like to show you," Samuel said, offering his arm. "If you're willing to walk a bit." Eliza slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, feeling the strength in his arm as he led her through the wheat field on a narrow path. They climbed a small rise crowned by another ancient oak tree, its branches spreading wide against the sky. From this vantage point, they could see for miles the endless prairie, the distant smudge of town, and the vast blue sky above. "This is my thinking spot," Samuel admitted, his voice soft with shared confidence. "When things get overwhelming, or when I need to make important decisions, I come here." Eliza looked up at him, noting how the sunlight caught the hints of gold in his brown hair. "And what decisions bring you here lately?" Samuel turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. His work-roughened fingers were gentle against her skin. "Lately I've been thinking about how different my life could be with the right person sharing it." His blue eyes searched hers intently. "Someone who sees the beauty in this life, who understands that loving the land is part of loving me." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. "Have you reached any conclusions in your thinking?" she whispered. Instead of answering immediately, Samuel reached up to touch her cheek, his palm warm against her skin. "I know I'm just a farmer, Eliza. I can't offer you the refinements of city life or the kind of society you grew up with. But I can promise you a life filled with purpose and love for the land, for each other, for the life we could build together." Tears welled up in Eliza's eyes as she leaned into his touch. "I didn't come west looking for refinement, Samuel. I came looking for something real, something true." She smiled up at him, her heart full. "I think I've found it." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, full of tenderness and respect, but it held enough passion to make her cheeks flush and her heart soar. When they finally parted, Samuel pressed his forehead to hers, both of them breathing deeply. "Marry me, Eliza," he whispered. "Stay here with me, beneath this prairie sky." "Yes," she answered without hesitation, her heart too full for more words. Their courtship continued through the winter months, though everyone in town knew they were promised to each other. Samuel would visit the schoolhouse after classes, bringing small gifts, wildflower bouquets, fresh-picked apples, or books he'd ordered from back east. They spent evening hours on Mrs. Henderson's porch, talking about their hopes and dreams while Samuel read aloud from Eliza's favorite novels. They married in the spring, when the prairie burst into bloom with countless wildflowers. The ceremony took place beneath the oak tree on their thinking hill, with the entire town gathered to celebrate. Eliza wore a simple white dress adorned with prairie flowers, and Samuel's eyes shone with pride and love as they spoke their vows against the backdrop of endless sky and rolling wheat fields. Life as a farmer's wife brought challenges Eliza had never imagined in Philadelphia, but she embraced them wholeheartedly. She continued teaching, riding to the schoolhouse on horseback each morning, her lessons now enriched by her growing understanding of prairie life. Together, she and Samuel worked to make the farm prosper, facing each challenge as a team. Their days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Dawn found them sharing quiet moments over coffee on the porch, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. During the day, they each attended to their duties, Samuel in the fields, Eliza at the schoolhouse, but evenings were their time together. They spent summer nights on their porch, watching thunderstorms roll across the prairie while sharing dreams and sweet kisses. Winter evenings found them curled together by the fire, reading or planning for spring planting, their love growing stronger with each passing season. Through drought and plenty, through successful harvests and poor ones, their bond only deepened. Samuel's steady strength supported Eliza through homesick moments, while her unwavering faith in him helped during difficult seasons. They discovered that love wasn't just in the grand gestures or passionate moments, but in the simple things: a shared smile across a room, a gentle touch while passing, the quiet understanding that came from facing life's challenges together. Years later, Eliza would often think back to that first day in Willow Creek, when she'd stepped off the stagecoach into what seemed like an alien world. The prairie that had once felt empty now felt full of life, of love, of countless precious moments shared with the man who had captured her heart. And Samuel, her steady, strong Samuel, had shown her that sometimes the greatest adventures come not from seeking the extraordinary, but from finding the extraordinary in the simple things: a sunset over wheat fields, the quiet strength of a loving hand, and the endless beauty of the prairie sky. Under that vast sky, Eliza and Samuel built more than a farm. They built a life, one day at a time, their love as enduring as the land itself. And in the end, Eliza realized that she hadn't just found a home on the prairie, she had found herself, and in doing so, had found everything she never knew she was looking for. Their love story, written beneath the prairie sky, proved that sometimes the greatest romances aren't found in grand ballrooms or elegant parlors, but in the honest love between two hearts who choose each other every day beneath the endless prairie sky.